Welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your hosts, like the original times, back in the old days, just Evan Ginzburg and Buddy Sotello. Yes, this is just like it was when we first started the program. Before we I guess we've had a maximum of 4 guests on at the same time with the tribute show, and now it's back to the original formula. It's like the KFC, the old Coke Classic, when they used to call it Coke Classic. And it's us.
And like when we started the show, the pandemic is still raging. So unfortunately,
I just got my booster shot.
Oh, how you feel?
I actually worked the day of my booster shot, and I was okay until getting to like the end of the workday. Then I was getting kind of like, my energy's running low. Saturday I slept until like 10:30 in the morning, which, blessed God, was just, my body just needed it. And I've been totally normal ever since. Well, normal when it comes to me, Yeah. There's only so normal that I get on an everyday basis, but it's fine, and certainly brings much, for me, the peace of mind knowing that I won't be put on a respirator anytime soon, is nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're up to about 800,000 dead in the USA. So for those people who dismiss this as politics and propaganda, you're pretty much idiots.
Yeah, no, I mean, here in Marin County, we are at an 85% vaccination rate. We are one of the highest percentage counties in the world as far as, vaccination goes. And I just kicked the percentage up another notch, thanks to my immunization. And anyone who's listening to this, if you haven't gotten your booster shot or your original shots, now's a pretty good time to get it, because people are getting sick with other things, right? They're getting flus and colds and so forth, and they're coughing more and they're spitting more, and you're going to wind up getting all of their stuff, because you get that anyway every year. Everyone gets the flu every year. Everyone gets colds every year. So if you're going to get all that stuff, why are you not thinking that you would get COVID too?
My wife and I both had it. It was not pleasant. Luckily, we got through it. We weren't hospitalized or anything, but I've had a half dozen friends die. I had one friend on a respirator, and it is quite serious. And I don't want to bring people down, but take care of yourself and take care of your kids. You got idiots orphaning their kids. Their parents both dying from this unnecessarily. So
No, yeah, absolutely. I just think that the problem is, as a society, and I can relate this to wrestling in the sense that wrestling thrives off of the short attention span folks. People who want to see something very quickly that gratifies them, a 5-minute match that gives them all the violence they're looking for in a 5-minute package. And we've gotten to the point where as a society, we can't give a long-term point of attention to something like COVID, where, now it's 2 years. I mean, we haven't focused as a society on something for 2 years ever in my time growing up. I mean, yeah, there was the Vietnam War, but that wasn't an everyday sort of thing where everybody in America stood to be threatened by its existence. I mean, It was unpleasant, but it wasn't something that we were all threatened by. This is a collective thing that we're all threatened by. And I think people are losing that, if I can use a 10-cent word, perspicacity to be aware of it and diligent about it and still afraid of it. People have lost that. And so people are getting together in big groups without masks. They're celebrating with their families indoors without any kind of, precautions for COVID. And they're all unvaccinated. And it's because people are like, I want this to be over so I'm just going to pretend it's not a problem anymore. And it's I mean, you've seen the movie Brazil, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's that wonderful scene where Catherine Hellman and her friend are having lunch together in that restaurant. In it's right around Christmas. It's also a great Christmas movie. If people haven't seen it, it'll get you definitely in the mood for Christmas. And they're having lunch together, and the bombs are exploding, and there's all the terrorism that's happening, and they like have to put up a barrier like behind them so that nobody is seeing all the bombs going off, and they're just standing there conversing like everything is normal. And I think that's the way people are with COVID.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. A little bit of creative editing, but so it just reminds me of people that want to work so hard to ignore what's happening that they're missing like the bombs exploding right behind them.
Exactly. On a brighter note, people were praising Ring of Honor's final battle yesterday. And I'd just like to say publicly that some of the best nights of my life was seeing Ring of Honor in New York City live, especially during the Nigel McGuinness era when he was their champion. And I say all the time that Nigel McGuinness against Bryan Danielson was the Flair, Steamboat, or Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe of that era. I know you managed Nigel McGuinness. I know you gotta.
And he was a great guy, super nice professional. One of the best matches I ever managed was him versus Mark Smith. That was absolutely phenomenal, and basically a West Coast version of one of the battles that he had with Nigel on Ring of Honor in the East Coast. So it was kind of, and as I said before in other shows, it was always tough for us here on the West that we could never see a Ring of Honor show, especially here in San Francisco. There's only one Ring of Honor show, quote unquote, that happened in the Bay Area, and it was at that disastrous Russell Fan Fest thing that was a huge failure that, Elena and I talk about every so often, but we never got a chance to see some of that. It's like ECW and Ring of Honor. I think it was one of the sad things that they never came out west and made their presence felt out here.
Yeah, I was at the early ECW shows in Philly that Eddie Gilbert was booking before Paul Heyman, and ECW was electric. However, later in its run, when they were going through the third flaming table and the fourth flaming table, it was the law of diminishing values. But Terry Funk versus Sabu was unbelievable. I saw that live, and Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero, that 1 hour TV draw that I believe it was a draw. That was unbelievable. That was wrestling elevated to art. So it's hard to believe that ECW and even seemingly ROH is nostalgia now. ROH may be coming back in some lesser capacity in the spring, and you hope there's another billionaire somewhere that could help it rise from the ashes. But it's unfortunately, it doesn't look great at this point. And
well, I think that's what, with ECW, we've seen how Vince McMahon hated it so much that he wants it to be forever buried. And I'm afraid he's going to do the same thing with Ring of Honor. Is eventually he's going, because he has all the money, he will buy it and bury it. Do you know what I mean?
Or he will add all of that content, and a lot of those guys, Kevin Steen, now Kevin Owens, Tyler Black, now Seth Rollins, Claudio Castagnoli, now Cesaro, etc., so on, not to bore people. They were all stars in Ring of Honor and other indies. And, I saw Cesaro against Nigel for the ROH belt, and I saw Tyler Black, as ROH champion. And, these guys were not made by Vince. These guys honed their skills with groups like Ring of Honor, and Triple H is a genius and Vince is a genius. That they cherry picked some of the best wrestlers in the world that they did not create. And I tell people all the time that Ring of Honor, after maybe the NWA of the 80s, was the greatest wrestling I ever saw, with the Horsemen, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, the Russians, Flair
Not
on
global.
top.
Not global.
No. The Crockett.
That's a joke.
Yeah.
Global.
Crockett's NWA was the best wrestling I ever saw, probably followed by WWF, which Vince's father, it's just unbelievable, especially, these guys, all-time legends that we would see in New York regularly. And then I would say the third greatest promotion I ever saw was Ring of Honor. And there's been no good wrestling since the territories, guys. I mean, it's absolute nonsense, because and some of these guys are like, oh, Ring of Honor, they were just spot monkeys. I'm like, man, if you saw Nigel McGuinness and Bryan Danielson live, which I did 4 times, and every time was 4 stars plus. I mean, they're clueless, absolutely clueless. And so as corny as it may sound, I tell people some of the best nights of my life were at Ring of Honor shows. And some of these guys were so consistently excellent. Roderick Strong, Homicide, Claudio, Kevin Steen, Nigel, Austin Aries, Bryan Danielson.
You are talking about like 2/3 of the world champions that the WWE has had.
Exactly.
In the last 15 years.
These guys were so consistently good, very good, or great. I never saw them in a bad match, a lot of those guys. And
at least until the WWE got a hold of them, and then we can put the asterisk on that.
Oh yeah. I go to WWE at the Garden one night, and Kevin Owens is wrestling Brock Lesnar, and I'm like, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be great. It was like a 3-minute squash, and I'm watching this, and I'm like, I can't believe I just
the ring entrance took longer than it did for the match itself. I seem to remember. And for me, because I was West Coast in Northern California, the stuff that I really grew up with was the early AWA stuff. We got more AWA than WWF, and so the NWA never came out here. It was either AWA or WWF. So I watched a lot of early AWA matches, or at least early for my purposes. And then the other pet federations I really loved were Mid-South used to come on before the NWA. We had the early version of cable because we couldn't get any antenna signal from our house. So we actually invested in cable, like one of the first families in Tiburon to get cable. So we had 36 channels, which was a huge deal. And TBS was one of the channels. And so they brought us Mid-South Wrestling, which just blew my mind. I mean, it just totally blew my mind what kind of stuff, because I'd always heard about those guys, but never seen them ever, because they never came out here live. And that introduced me to like Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair and the Rock and Roll Express and Tully Blanchard. And I was like, wow, because it was so different from what we were watching with the AWA live and the WWF on TV.
Well, the AWA was fading in the mid to late 80s, and the NWA was going strong. And we got the AWA in New York, New Jersey with Pro Wrestling USA, and later that collapsed. And then it was just straight AWA shows. And, I saw some excellent stuff. I saw Nick Bockwinkel against Larry Zbyszko. But they put Sergeant Slaughter on top, and he had lost a step or two. And it was like Sergeant Slaughter against Kamala. And, it was... They even had Sergeant Slaughter against Ric Flair, which was disappointing, shockingly.
Really?
But,
I didn't see that match.
Yeah, but was surprisingly disappointing? They had main events, the Freebirds against the Road Warriors, and for whatever reason, it just didn't click. And I love both of them, but
it is two legendary tag teams against each other.
The first night at the Meadowlands, it was the Road Warriors and the Freebirds, and then the next time it was the Road Warriors and Ellering against the all three Freebirds. And I don't know, it was good, it was very good. It wasn't great. Maybe the expectations were too high. Plus the crowds weren't huge. So
you think about the AWA, they really had all the diamonds in their hands. They had Hulk Hogan. They had the Road Warriors. They had Kurt Hennig. They had Scott Hall.
They had everybody.
They had
Vince
some
cherry
great...
picked them. Vince picked them all.
But when they had them, they misused those guys too.
But also one of the reasons, and it's not exactly a secret, Vern was tight with the money, and Vince just paid more, and they one by one they left Vern. And
also the AWA didn't have the glitter and the glitz that the WWF had at the time. That back when it was the WWF, they didn't have the star power. They didn't have the WrestleMania, that made everyone, and the pay-per-view money, that was coming in, and they weren't filling the arenas like
they had pay-per-views. They just weren't successful. They had
they were
against
terrible.
Jerry Lawler.
You look at what the WWF was putting out at that time, especially in retrospect. You look at, and then you look back at like AWA Super Brawl, and I mean, no offense, but it looks like something that I would put together.
Yeah.
And that's not, I'm not exactly like a professional video guy, so it really had that feeling like a high school video company was putting together their pay-per-views, whereas the WWF had that really big feel of like what you would see with the NFL, what you would see with Major League Baseball. It had that really professional look, and a lot of effort was put into the production elements and the how slick it looked and the TV. And for us, I think for all of us collectively as a society, because we hadn't seen wrestling presented in such a way. We were always used to the one camera shot with the lighting that comes just from the top of the arena down on the ring, and no entrance music.
But
yes.
Let me just say this. I had this conversation with some guy online the other day. He was saying WWF 1986, 1987 was the best wrestling I ever saw, and I said I totally disagree. I said, that's when I stopped going to WWF, when they turned it into a circus, when they turned it into a kiddie show. I pretty much, with a few rare exceptions, stopped going, and I was going to NWA because it was just a grittier, better product. So, you could shine a turd and it's still a turd. And a lot of the, late, I know some people have this great nostalgia for late 80s, early 90s WWF, but
because that's where wrestling was in my wheelhouse. That is when I was like really into wrestling as the biggest part of my life, was that time frame. So yeah, and it was because of the WWF. Look, it's you get older and you look back on stuff and you go, well, that was kind of embarrassing, but that's what it was for me, especially on the West Coast. The WWF was everything.
But again, I'm at one of their pay-per-views, And there in the main event is Hogan and Beefcake. There's Zeus, who's not even a wrestler. And I'm like, this isn't Bruno Sammartino and Superstar Billy Graham. This isn't Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask. This isn't Snooker and Morocco. This is a circus. And again, there were exceptions. I went in 86 or 7, I went to the Garden and they had Bruno and Tito against Adonis and Savage in a cage, and that was great. It was great. But a lot of it was, everybody was a character. This guy's a plumber. And this guy's, all of a sudden Steve Kern, who's a great wrestler, is Skinner. And, it's like some of the stuff was just silly. Bastion Booger and, I know these are different periods, but I'm just saying it became a kiddie show, and the wrestling many times was lost in all of it. Yeah, DiBiase was great in that era, and
Bret the Hitman,
Bret Hart, and Mr. Perfect, and sure, Savage and Steamboat was a masterpiece, but a lot of it became just vanilla pablum for kids. And today, when they talk about sports entertainment, I'm like, entertainment is supposed to be entertaining. And much of it isn't.
God, yeah. No, I was trying to watch Friday Night SmackDown this week, because I try to do it, and it's like trying to drink bitter medicine.
And SmackDown's actually better than Raw.
I understand. Raw, I've just given up on completely. But I tried watching SmackDown, and even then I was like, would you just get to the actual action? It just seemed like there were endless promos and endless commercials and endless ads for things that I just didn't care about,
Endless, stilted, scripted promos. If you had Billy Graham talking in 1975 or 6 or 7, it was worth watching. To watch some stupid scripted promo, and then here's the problem. I actually see posts today where guys will break down a WWE show because many of the fans are obsessives, and they'll actually say in a 2-hour SmackDown there was 20 minutes of actual wrestling. In a 3-hour Raw there was 30 minutes of actual wrestling, whatever. I'm just throwing out these ballpark figures. So to sit there for 3 hours to get 30 minutes of wrestling, which is, as you just said, interrupted by endless commercials on top of it, I'm not a kid anymore. I have more years behind me than ahead of me. I don't want to waste every Monday night of my life for 30 minutes of entertainment. I could watch a great movie and go to the gym in that 3 hours. You follow?
Or I can watch, the NFL, or I can watch the NBA and get more entertainment out of that too than what I get out of it. I mean, yes, they have commercials there, but those commercials at least are, they don't interrupt the actual action itself. They don't take you out of, the third quarter of a football game in the middle of a play and then come back and 5 plays have already happened, and they come back and go, yeah, it would have been great if you could have seen all that, but kept the, we made sure to get the ads in there so that you got that and you didn't get the action you wanted.
Even when they do that little box, I forget what you call it, where you could see the action, I'm distracted by the commercial.
It's terrible. It is a terrible trend. And of course they would never do that to a stupid promo. They would never do that to say, Triple H. They would never cut Triple H short or Stephanie McMahon short or Shane McMahon short. They get as much time as they want to talk, but the rest of us, any action that they're cutting off, that's one of the things that they do. So I wanted to shift gears for a second and talk a little bit about the passing of Blackjack Lanza.
Okay, sure. I started watching wrestling in 72 and started attending in 74 because I'm 103 years old. And one of the great early tag teams that I saw in the Tri-WF was the Blackjacks. And let me just say this for the younger fans who may not realize it. back then,
if we have any younger fans.
yeah, that's right. So back then, we did not have tons of these giant guys, like the Blackjacks. I mean, these guys, the average person was smaller 50 years ago. Even the NBA guys were smaller. Seriously.
And NFL, if you look at the classic sports stuff and you see like things from like Super Bowl 1 and 2, you're like, some of these guys look like schmoes. And like, they're on the sidelines, smoking cigarettes and stuff,
My father was all city basketball in the 1940s, and he was 5'11". You wouldn't see that today. You just wouldn't see it. So my point being, in the 70s, when you got guys the size of Mulligan and Lanza, Andre, Don Leo Jonathan, Kowalski, Ernie Ladd, these guys were true giants to us, larger than life, and especially me as a kid or a teenager, depending on the year. And so I saw the Blackjacks at the Garden as tag team champs, and I saw at the Coliseum Lanza against Andre headlining, because it was like Battle of the Giants. Lanza was looked at as a giant in that era. He was a big guy, 6'7" or whatever he was, 6'6". And, and he was a tough guy. He had a great career. He, they went to Japan. AWA Lanza was a huge star with Heenan's Army.
Absolutely.
Of course, he worked for Vince for many years behind the scenes, but big name performer, and powerful guy in WWE as well, backstage. So yeah, man.
I always thought the Blackjacks were a couple of guys that legitimately could clear out a bar.
Oh yeah.
If they got mad, if they were together and somebody got them pissed off, you would need a bar full of other people to try to calm them down. They're like the Bruiser and the Crusher. That if they actually got into a real fight, I think they could pretty much clear the room of any other people that were in there. There's not many other.
In that era, the fans. Mulligan was stabbed and almost died by a fan. I don't know if the average person is aware of this. Piper was stabbed. Blassie, a fan threw acid in his face. Okay, Moolah was stabbed. I mean, there's a long list of this. So, in the bar scene, fans would start up with these guys, the heels, because they really believed back in the day. Johnny Valiant said to me, I never looked for a fight. I always walked away. I always diffused it. I'm not a tough guy, Johnny looked at himself as a performance artist, because a lot of what the Valiants were doing were comedy, performance art. The promos are hilarious if you listen to them. So Johnny was never like, I'm looking for a fight. Johnny was like, I want to get home in one piece. It's, but yeah, that's a valid point. Guys like Mulligan and Lanza, they could handle themselves, and a lot of those guys back then were wild, brawling guys, the Dick Murdoch types. And the night Dick Murdoch died, this is a crazy story. He had a nosebleed. And, he was a tough, macho guy. And, it's nothing. And it's bleeding for hours. And he doesn't think to go to the hospital. He died in his living room chair. Yeah. So. Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of that. I mean, guys.
In his 40s. Young guy.
Yeah. No, it's some, especially, if you have a few drinks on top of it, or you're taking a lot of painkillers,
I mean, I've had a few nosebleeds in my life, but it didn't go on for 8 hours or whatever. It's like I would know something's wrong.
Well, 16 years ago, I started throwing up and didn't stop throwing up. And
That's a sign something's wrong.
Yeah. After about a day of just solid throwing up, I knew that there was something really wrong. And I was taken to the emergency room, and they said if I'd come in about 8 hours later, it would have been not to the emergency room, but to the morgue. And
wow.
That's when they found out my pancreas had completely stopped making insulin, and I'd turned into a diabetic basically overnight, or through the last few months. That was in November. That was 16 years ago. So
had you passed, we wouldn't be entertaining the dozens and dozens of our listeners.
Exactly. Well, actually, it was before I had done my California Championship Wrestling stint, which was my highest point in professional wrestling, and my wrestling for charity stuff. So there's, I would have missed out on working with all sorts of incredible people, like Timothy Thatcher is one of the guys that was in California Championship Wrestling. Brian Cage was someone. I just contributed an article on Brian Cage over at Mark Madison's Pro Wrestling Stories. Yeah, Pro Wrestling Stories.
Pro Wrestling Stories is JP's talk.
Sorry, you're right. Pro Wrestling Post. It was a Pro Wrestling Post story, and I talked about his. There's so much I would have missed out if I had not made it through that moment. So definitely, it's a cautionary tale for people to look out for themselves. But
and since you mentioned, I just want to quickly send out get well wishes to Mark Madison, our own Mike Lano, and
right.
Mike Henry, who's a longtime fixture in East Coast wrestling. So that's Mark, Mike, and Mike. And next week we'll be acknowledging the N's who.
Yeah,
the M's. We'll go to the N's who are not doing so well, but
the three M's we do care about, and Mike hopefully will be recovering well enough. For giving him a couple weeks off so that he can get back in the rotation, and then we're gonna and it's an ongoing thing. We're thinking about making changes to the program, and hopefully maybe we can look at a February launch to have a whole new track and a whole new way of doing things here on the show.
In the future, I saw. I don't know if it still exists, but they used to have news shows with like hot women telling the news, like really straight, like straight down the line, but they were all nude. So you could have Buddy Sotello nude, in studio, and that'll be a different,
But I think YouTube will have something to say about that.
The ratings would plummet even more.
Exactly. We'd be the first YouTube to get negative hits.
That's right. That's
minus like 150 hits. Well, whatever we can do to get attention these days.
That's right. Since we're on the subject of health, I want to mention that I started about 3-4 weeks ago doing DDP yoga. On the recommendation of Chris Craven, who's a indie wrestling manager, we have
former and a friend of the show.
Yeah, a good friend of mine. He doesn't live far from me, and I'll tell you, I'm very impressed with it, and I'll tell you exactly why, and not to belabor it. You sign up for the program. It's very inexpensive. I mean, it's the price is so fair for what they give you, and you set up a program, and they'll say, for example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're doing this exercise, and the video is there, and you can do it at your leisure. If you work, you can do before work, after work, whatever the case may be. So you have flexibility, freedom, and it builds as you go along. And there's also nutritional advice and motivational stuff. And the best thing that I like about it is, I'm an older guy, and instead of having some 21-year-old in peak physical condition with a six-pack of abs intimidating you, you have the actual, guys on there that have made incredible gains. And you go, if this guy could do it, I could do it. I'm in better shape than this guy. I could do it. And it motivates you, and it's, I really recommend it, DDP Yoga. And he just got married, I saw on Facebook, so congrats to him.
Yes, to a lady named Paige. So her name is now Paige.
Paige. And, What page is it? Page 37. That's a great name, Page.
It's too bad it wasn't in the 80s where you had pagers, so you could have Page's pager.
Yeah, I'll tell you, he's an impressive guy. You know, because
I did meet him. I did meet him in 2007, and
I've met him at conventions and such. But you know,
back then he was promoting this thing called Bang. He was promoting this thing that was, one of those erectile, like Viagra replacement. He was calling it. It was called Bang. So he was really promoting that.
He's moved on to, pardon the pun, bigger and better things. So no, seriously, even Chris Craven sent me before and after pictures, and it's like unbelievable, like the progress this guy has made. And we always do these tribute shows because 3/4 of our friends in the business dropped dead. Had Chris continued the way he was going before this DDP, he might have been another tribute show, because he was a big boy, and now the guy looks great, and he's not a kid. So it works. The thing works, and not to cut a commercial or promo.
I know, no, we could use them as a promo. You talk to DDP about being a sponsor for our show. We could use a sponsor or two for our.
No, but I'm just saying it for the wrestling fans out there who have heard about it and for whatever reason, didn't jump in. I mean, yeah, I heard about it for years.
How long are the segments? How long are the exercise segments?
It depends what level you are. It could be as little as 20 minutes. It could be 45 minutes. It could be a combination even longer. I'm not at the advanced level. I just started 3 or 4 weeks ago, so my segments have been 20 to 45 minutes. When I say segments, the exercise programs that I'm doing, and you can handle it.
You've done a lot of Tai Chi, and you've done a lot of other yoga type things.
Yeah. So, I'm not like suffering terribly doing this, and but at the same,
compare the types of compared to like your Tai
Chi. Shockingly, a lot of it is very similar. Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, aerobics. It's very similar. Aerobics is a lot more intensive, but it's some of the moves are pretty much the same, believe it or not. And the beauty of it is, if you're doing this 3 days a week, I also go to the gym. I also do Tai Chi. I also walk a couple of miles every day, and they motivate you to eat healthier, so because if you eat like a pig, you can exercise all day. It's not going to really make a huge difference. So, I don't want to bore the listeners who are here to hear about wrestling or arts or whatever the case may be. But seriously, check it out. I think it could be life-changing, and I know this is the time of year we're about ready for the New Year's resolutions, and my New Year's resolution is not to argue with idiots on Facebook, because I pretty much could do every argument word for word, both sides. The Vince corporate apologist, the other day, I saw a thread where they listed pretty much every favorite of mine that I've loved in wrestling as overrated. Every single guy, Piper, Bruno, Flair, all the guys I love. These idiots just sit there all day and tear them down.
But Dolph Ziggler, there's a guy, you can Randy Orton, there's a guy you can hang your hat on.
I mean, Ziggler and Orton are talented, but I'm just saying.
But if you wanted to put him on Ric Flair's level, or you want to put him on
Ric Flair as NWA champion had more great matches in a month than Randy Orton or Dolph Ziggler have had in 20 years. Come on, be honest. Be honest.
Sure, absolutely. Or even like someone like maybe Rick Martel. You look at how when he was AWA champion, he faced a lot of top talent during the time that he
Martel was always excellent, and Vince, turned him into a cartoon also. But so let me throw this out there. Tito Santana in WWF. This guy every night went out,
Loved him.
Had a good, very good, or great match. Okay.
Loved him.
I mean, he used to headline the Garden against Valentine when Hogan was on a different card. He was the headliner.
Those were great matches. The Tito Valentine feud was absolutely white hot at that time.
Tremendous.
It was huge.
And he was always a tag champ. And the thing is, the guy always gave 110%. Okay. So now you have the younger fans. They only saw him in the 90s. Vince gave him a stupid gimmick, the Matador, neutered him like they neutered 50 other guys, 150 other guys. And they don't see him as an all-time great star like I do,
Part of that, though, I feel, is the WWE's fault. And the WWE doesn't do enough to talk about some of the great old matches and highlight those and give the modern wrestling fan a connection with the greatness of the past. And I think that is one thing you see in other sports, but you don't see right now in wrestling. And it's the biggest shame of all because Vince owns all the footage for the AWA and NWA. He controls.
Vince is interested in selling gimmicks and pumping out TV product, and
But you can sell history too if you do it the right way. You can sell history, and you can sell legends, and you can sell the past decently if you treat it right. But if you treat it like it's an absolute pariah and an embarrassment, then the next generation grows up thinking, well, these guys were all just jokes and overrated because the WWE isn't sticking up for these guys. And
I saw a website, a Jobber Hall of Fame, and they have all these guys who were champions and headliners at various points in their career, even in WWF and WWF. But they saw them 10 years later, and I mean, guys like Butcher Paul Vachon and Rene Goulet and Mike Sharp, these guys all were headliners in different territories, champions, even in WWF. So they go, it's the Jobber Hall of Fame. And I go, it's not an honor you diminishing their career and stereotyping them. And I go, I saw Backlund wrestle Iron Mike Sharp as the headliner. That wasn't his whole career.
Yeah, but people now hate Bob Backlund a whole lot too. So Bob Backlund gets no respect. Therefore, anyone he fights is not going to get any respect.
So
either.
the interesting part was I'm going back and forth with these idiots, and Davey O'Hannon, the wrestler, he actually comments on my comment, going, Evan, I'm leaving this page. We didn't look at people as jobbers. We looked at them as quality wrestlers, not jobbers. A label diminishing them and defining their careers, which just weren't the case. I could take any one of those guys and say, this guy headlined in this territory. This guy was a champion in that territory. They weren't just quote unquote jobbers, carpenters, whatever you want to call it. These guys wrestled all around the world. What was interesting to me as a kid? We had a guy, Butcher Brannigan, big burly guy. So headliner in Australia, headliner in LA, and in New York, for whatever reason, they had him lose a lot. So if somebody said, this guy who's gone now, this is another thing, speaking ill of the dead, he's gone now, to say, oh, he was just a jobber, it's absolutely untrue. It's just not factually correct.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at some of the guys that I worked with that only got, a cup of coffee in the WWE, but but were big time champions and big deals here in the Bay Area in wrestling. I mean, there's guys like Mike Modest, there's guys like Boyce LeGrand, even guys like Timothy Thatcher are now making their way into the WWE. But they were champions and big deals here in California, for years to come. They show up on the WWE scene, and because nobody has heard of them, especially before the internet got really big. But even now, people don't really pay that much attention to coast West stuff. I mean, on the East Coast, and so they come from nowhere. But these people usually, they're turned into jobbers. A perfectly good example of that is that I managed Simon Gotch from the Vaudevillains. Okay, he had worked for 10, 15 years before he got to the WWE. To be part of that whole shtick that they had going on, and he had totally different characters and wrestled under totally different means before he wound up being Simon Gotch for the Vaudevillains. And people just think these people just show up out of nowhere. Yeah. And they don't. They have real histories. Now, that's one thing that is a little worrisome, is that the WWE's recent announcement that they don't want to get anyone from the indies anymore after this mass firing that they did, and boy, look, Vince still has another week or so that he could get rid of a bunch more people right before Christmas. So and before the first of the year, I'm sure there's contracts that he wants to jettison. So if I were in the WWE, I would not spend a whole lot on Christmas gifts for, unless your last name is McMahon, I don't think I would spend a lot on holiday gifts, because you never know where your job's going to be, for the start of next year. But these people just don't come out of nowhere. I mean, they build themselves into something, to work to get to that level. And then a lot of times they're just turned into, jobbers, by the people that watch, and they don't realize how much effort it took to get to that level, even where you could be a jobber. My friend Tony Jones, who's been on the show here, he's only fought maybe 4 matches in the WWE, and one of them I saw live was in Sacramento. He fought Snitsky, and Snitsky's intro was longer than the match itself. He lost in 95 seconds to Snitsky. But he was happy to get it. He was like, you know what? I worked real hard, and I practiced, and this, even though it was a short ass match, I got in a WWE ring, and I was able to get people to see me on nationwide, worldwide television. And for a lot of people, that's what they're trying to get. It's a lifetime achievement, even if they get beaten by 95 seconds.
Absolutely. I mean, how many people could say they were at the peak part of, the highest level of any entertainment business or whatnot? So the first time I've acted in about a dozen films. I acted with Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler. He won the Golden Globe, and he was nominated. He was nominated for the Academy Award, and we were improvising the scene. So you have a higher chance of getting hit by lightning than that happening. So it was pretty surreal, actually. Speaking of the arts, coming to this show, Oscar from Men on the Mission, the rapper, and also Chaz Kangas, Chazkangas, who's a rapper who loves wrestling, and he just did a 2-minute rap that encapsulated the entire ROH Heavyweight Championship.
Wow.
Like the 18 or 19 years, whatever it is, in a 2-minute rap. Chaz Kangas, talented guy. And check that out. And they'll be coming to the show shortly. And as Buddy said, we're going to do a little revamping in 2022. Do a little more arts and a
lot more nudity.
Buddy's going to be nude. That's going to draw the ladies. It's going to be huge. And
Well, I'd like you to start doing your movie segments too. We have a few minutes here. Tell us what
Really?
movies you can check out. People.
Really? I
Yeah.
I just watched tonight What Happened Was with, and this is all improv, folks. I didn't know he was going to say this. Tom Noonan, Karen Silas. This was an off Broadway show. They turned it into a film, and it's all shot in one claustrophobic Manhattan apartment. Okay, and it's the worst, darkest first date that two human beings ever had, and it's an interesting quality film. It's kind of heart-wrenching, actually, because they're kind of social misfits, and the attraction is there, but they have a lot of issues.
A lot
And
of car chase scenes, special effects, alien monsters.
car chases, yeah. Yeah,
kung fu fights.
Kung fu fighting, yeah. It's you'll either love it or you'll hate it, because it's basically a film play, although it's not on stage. It's an actual film, but it's all in one apartment over 85 minutes. This horrific first date. It's interesting.
It's like a
film.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf kind of experience.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm trying to think what else. I saw a film called Kedi, Kedi, which is a documentary on the massive stray cat population in Istanbul, Turkey, which is really about these really wonderful, kind people who are not rich and feel it's their obligation to take care of these cats. So somebody's calling?
I just put it on mute. They should know that I'm doing my podcast right now. They hung up. So there you go.
So What Happened Was, and Kedi, and there's another documentary. I'll do this real quick, called Night School, and it's not that comedy with Tiffany Haddish. It's a documentary. These three really poverty-stricken people in Indianapolis are going to night school to get their high school diploma, and it's really poignant, like how they struggle and really, really fight through their personal issues to get their education and pull themselves up by it's a great film, Night School.
And it looks like you get your DVDs from the library or something like that?
I get a lot of DVDs from the library. I basically treat it like a Blockbuster. I'll just like this company is Oscilloscope.
My 10-year-old kids are now saying, "What's a Blockbuster?"
Yeah. Oscilloscope Laboratories is a tremendous film company that distributes all indie films, and just some amazing works. And the one I recommend the most is Wendy and Lucy with Michelle Williams. All she has in life is a dog and a broken down car. She doesn't have a dollar to her name, and the car breaks down, and it just sets off a chain reaction of there's a lot of people in this country struggling today. And Wendy and Lucy, what a great film. What a great film.
That is one, especially when you think of all the pap that's out there. It's amazing. You have 200, 300 channels of cable, and a lot of time, especially this time of year, it's nothing but Hallmark holiday movies and endless reruns of crap that you didn't want to see the first time around. So it's
I won't watch something just for the sake of watching something. I want to be enlightened. I want to be moved. I want to learn about the human condition. Another reason I won't watch Monday Night Raw, because it's 3 hours of your life you'll never get back. I'm not going to watch wrestling just for the sake of watching wrestling. And again, the older you get, you value your time more, because you don't know how much more time you have. It's funny. We were talking about DDP yoga and Tai Chi and all of this. It occurred to me and this will end the show on a grim note. It occurred to me, what if it all works and I live to 100 and I outlive everybody, my friends, my family? It's like a perpetual state of mourning. I don't know. I don't know if that's the greatest.
No, it kind of happened to my dad, actually. He died last month at the end of October, at age 89, and at his funeral there were only like a handful of his actual friends there.
He outlived them.
Yeah, he outlived most of them. So yeah, that's one of your options. Of course, you are surrounded. It's a little different when you have kids in your family that will be there for you, but you don't. I mean, you don't have any kids, so right. That is one of the the drawbacks. You have a lot more money that you didn't have kids. You can be thankful for that. But on the other side, the legacy is one of the reasons why we go through the trouble of having kids. We want somebody to be sad when we're gone and not spray paint our graves.
When I'm gone, they can watch The Wrestler in 350 days and whatever else we produce. Speaking of which, I'm doing an interview with ITV this Friday. They're doing a show on Roddy Piper, and they're filming in New York. So I'll let people know about that when it comes out. ITV is a major station in England, and I'll have a different kind of legacy.
It's of all the wrestlers that have died, to me, the hardest one to like deal with is Roddy Piper. He's the one that it's hard for me to deal with the fact that he's gone. He seems like he's left the deepest legacy of all the ones that have gone recently.
It's funny you say that, because every time I watch I'm not one of these guys who endlessly watches wrestling, whether it's new or old, but I will watch any heel Roddy Piper match that I haven't seen, because I just love that guy. And when you're watching him against Snooker or Orndorff or whoever, you just can't wrap your head around him being gone, because the charisma is so off the charts. And then it's compounded when you go, here's Piper, here's Snooker, here's whoever else, and they're all gone, And
then you read on the internet list how overrated they all are.
Yeah, they're all overrated. Yeah. So it's I said in the pre-interview with ITV, I said to them, when Piper came out at Madison Square Garden as a heel, it was absolute chaos, carnage, and when it was
unpredictable. You didn't know what was going to happen.
I don't think he knew 1 second to the next what he was going to do. So when it was all over, whether it was 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes, when it was all over, you could actually breathe again. That's how exciting it was.
I remember with the Piper's Pits, and when does this happen now? You actually were looking forward. I was looking forward to Piper's Pit. Like when they would do the ad segment, when I'd be watching on Saturday night, they would say, coming up, Piper's Pit. And I would be grabbing my brother and saying, come on, let's get ready for Piper's Pit. We would be sitting here like this, waiting for watching our 19-inch little color television, trying to figure out what would happen next. It was must-see television, especially in the days before most people had VCRs and the ability to record stuff and watch it on the internet later. You had to see what was going to happen on Piper's Pit, because every one of my friends was going to talk about it on Monday. We were all going to say what happened on Piper's Pit and dissect it and say, can you believe he hit Snuka on the head with a coconut? Can you believe that he went up to Andre the Giant and told him that he was just a shrimp, and Andre picked him up with both hands and shook him like a leaf? We were just, it was so exciting to have a promo segment that brought excitement. When does that happen now? It's usually the opposite way. When I see a promos coming up, I'm like, get me through this.
I mean, even when WWE has a quality match, and I would say on every pay-per-view, there's 2 or 3 quality matches, you just go, I know who's going to win, or I don't particularly care who's going to win. I just want to see a good match. And it's not the same thing as being live for, heel Piper or prime Ric Flair with the NWA belt, or NWA War Games, or, the electricity. Even the Road Warriors just walking to the ring, the electricity, the Midnight Express walking to the ring and even though the Road Warriors was so much more imposing physically than anybody else, pretty much, the Midnight Express walking down the ring with the music, you just knew this is going to be a great match. So the excitement was there. And I've sat at WWE cards at Madison Square Garden with a big crowd in recent years, off and on, and I've seen some quality matches, but inevitably you're so numb 2 hours into it by the time that quality match hits that it's just not the same thing. A wrestling show is supposed to build.
Yeah. And there isn't build. Absolutely not. I haven't watched a pay-per-view that's built to anything in a long time. And hopefully, if Ring of Honor comes back, that's something they can, address and start getting to. I hope so. I just hope. My fear is that the WWE is just going to buy it and bury it like they did with the other feds.
Oh, I wouldn't mind having the access, whether it's AEW or somebody independent or WWE, putting up their content. I'd love to see some of the classics.
Yeah, but their tendency is to buy it and then to shove it in a corner and say
piecemeal, piecemeal.
Yeah, what you gotta love is the WWE. Don't love something else that wasn't the WWE. Love the WWE, and we don't. And I don't think we are anytime soon. Anyway, it's a great show this week. Really appreciate everything, and we'll see you next week. We're gonna have your guests from the rapper and Oscar.
No, that's the first Sunday. Oscar's going to come on the first Sunday in January, and I already scheduled that. And Chaz Kangas, we'll see when he's available. And
looking forward to it.
Yeah, these guys are talented guys. Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll see everybody. We'll see you next week, and we'll see all the fans next week. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good night.